Hello again, everyone. This is another installment of MustardHub Voices Behind the Build. In these episodes, I sit down with the people building, backing, and running better workplaces. I'm your host, Curtis Forbes, and my guest today is Spencer Linsley. Spencer is a seasoned business leader and partnership strategist with deep experience driving growth at the intersection of sales, partnerships, and tech-enabled solutions. Currently leading partnerships at Bright Benefits, Spencer works at the forefront of modern benefits education, helping brokers, HR teams, and employers better communicate and engage around benefits in ways that are clear, confident, and impactful. Before joining Bright, Spencer spent several years shaping strategic alliances and revenue growth in the HR tech space, including leadership roles in sales and partnerships at Awardco, where he connected innovative solutions with enterprise customers and ecosystem partners. His career journey from sales leadership to partnership development underscores his belief in building trust, aligning cross-functional teams, and leveraging strategic collaboration to unlock long-term value. Originally from the Bay Area, Spencer now calls Salt Lake Valley and Wasatch Front home. He enjoys all things outdoors, skiing, hiking, camping, and spending as much time outside as possible, especially playing and adventuring with his two daughters. Welcome to Behind the Build. Thanks for joining me, Spencer.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
That was quite a mouthful. You've done quite a bit. First of all, I have to say, also a girl dad, and it's kind of the coolest thing ever. So I know you have a new addition.
We do. Ruby, my second daughter, joined us just over 4 weeks ago. So she's a fresh one, and she loves hanging out with mom, and she's doing really, really well, growing fast, eating well, sleeping a lot. So all of the things you would wish for and hope to see in a new baby girl. So we're very fortunate, very lucky, and feeling blessed.
Well, congratulations. Super happy for you and your family. That's really amazing. Let's start a little bit with your story. I'm really curious to hear. I mean, tell me about yourself. Tell me about that career journey, right? What pulled you into the world of benefits and total rewards? That's, usually we're not mapping that out in high school.
No, we're not. And yeah, I think my journey is interesting. And like so many others, it wasn't a straight line to get to the place that I am here today. So yeah, I guess starting at the top, my family relocated from the Bay Area, San Francisco, to Salt Lake City, Utah, in the summer of 1999. My mother had her own business and worked remotely before remote work was a big thing, and so we moved to Utah because we love the mountains and we love skiing, and we loved both winter and summer recreation. So that's how I got here. I went to high school here with my siblings, and immediately after high school, I started at the University of Utah, where I originally was studying geophysics and geology.
Oh.
And a great place to do that here in Utah. And it was super intense. And at 17 going on 18 years old, it wasn't what I wanted to do. So I stopped doing that, and I started working at one of our local ski resorts here, Solitude Mountain Resort. And I took a couple years off of higher ed and got some tactical skills and experience. Became an EMT, a backcountry rescue worker, did avalanche mitigation work, and then started going back to business school. And I remember at the time, I kind of thought, hey, I love the outdoors. I love the outdoor industry, and maybe there's a place for me to find some sort of intersection of business and skiing, right? And that was kind of my vision at the time. Little did I know, coming out of the business school at University of Utah there, a good friend of mine said, hey, I'm working for this company. It's pretty cool, pays good. They have some entry-level positions. You should interview. And that's how I started in the world of SaaS. I started kind of on the client management, account management side of things. And the company was the CoStar Group, and it was kind of commercial real estate information and digital marketing solutions. And I did that for 4 years, a little over 4 years, I think, and loved my time there. Tons of great experience. My first kind of introduction into corporate life, if you will. Multinational organization, 5,000 employees, really large sales organization, and kind of moved up the ranks on the client side into sales. And the rest was really history, right? Sales became my craft and my profession, and something that I was passionate about because it kind of changed the landscape for me, and how I thought about how I could create a life and a career, and financially support a future family. And I guess also relevant to say, right around the same time, I met the girl who ended up being my wife, and a lot of maturing and personal growth happened, kind of realizing what it would take to kind of move to a person who would be considered a husband versus a person who was okay living out of a van outside the ski resort, and
Right.
living in ski boots and on the mountain. So that's the first foray, and from there, happy to talk a little bit about how I got into HR technology and where I'm at now. But usually there's a couple questions as to what was it like being a ski patroller or anything like that. So I'm happy to field those now or move on.
Yeah. Well, first, I would say I'm super happy that you actually see and draw the distinction between the husband material versus the guy who's totally cool living outside of a van at the bottom of a mountain, because like there are some who don't see the distinction between the two. So you're sort of spot on right there. It's really interesting to me. I mean, you're right. Most of our paths are non-linear, right? But there's always something that kind of pulls you in a direction or takes you somewhere, right? Where you're able to add value that's, I think, aligns with your own personal mission, right? You wind up working for organizations now. And this is me just sort of projecting a little bit, but you know, you found a career and opportunities, in sales and partnerships, and working in a space that helps people, right? That helps people feel better at work, who do better work, right? But you're also working on ski patrol, right? Which is another way of helping people, right? You're helping people get up the mountain. You're helping people get down the mountain, in sort of a metaphoric sense. That's exactly kind of what you're doing, right? With the software that you help sell and that you help partner. You help people get up and down the mountain, right? So it sort of feeds that part of you. Again, I'm projecting,
Yeah.
but I kind of see that through the interactions, that we've had, and the little that I've gotten to know you before this. I can kind of sense that. Am I hitting the nail on there?
Yeah, I think you definitely are, right? And it's interesting because I remember interviewing for that first job at CoStar, and I was on a final interview with the vice president of sales, who was a really cool guy, also a skier. And I kind of remember him mentioning this comment off the cuff of just kind of saying, like, you seem bright, articulate, but you're just really not the person that we're looking for this role. And I remember kind of thinking, like, well, why? What exactly am I lacking to get into this role? What is it about my skills, attributes, or maybe my character traits that's making me not a good fit? And that kind of always put a chip on my shoulder, because as a curious person, and a person who prides himself on being able to work hard, I was like, well, I should be able to do everything. I was young at that point, and I was like, okay, this isn't rocket science, I guess. Like, we're dealing with human beings and technology, and trying to understand the outcomes that they're hoping to get to, and help them get to that promised land. But I remember, early days, it was like, okay, it was a culture shock, and I just kind of thought, this is the way things must be, right? If you want to work in a high-paying corporate job, there's going to be elements, there's going to be components that are just not great, right? And that's just part of it. And I'll weave this into when I went to Awardco and how that changed for me. But I always kind of viewed my time on the mountain and working as a ski patroller as foundational to who I am now, and really kind of building the base level of skills that did translate into kind of corporate and knowledge professional work, right? And the biggest things I think that I can point back to were, leadership, communication, and just the philosophy that wherever you work, I wouldn't say in ski patrolling that the old adage that the customer is always right, because a lot of times in those environments, the customer is very much not right. But at the same time, like you serve others, right? You serve your team around you and you serve others. And those types of kind of philosophical points of view have really been ingrained in me and have served me well as I've adapted to new work environments. And continue to strive to add value with all of the interactions that I have with others.
I love that. And now you're with Bright Benefits, right? So tell me a little bit about it. What is Bright Benefits? What are the problems that you're trying to solve for employers?
Yeah, absolutely. So joined Bright last year and joined after a really, really amazing 4+ years at Awardco, and started here as the head of partnerships, reporting into our CEO, Landon Fielding, who is an amazing individual. Bright, really, in our most simplest, in the most simple way to put it, we our vision is to become a platform where all benefit education work happens, and it empowers the individuals who do that work, primarily brokers and HR teams. Part of the reason I was so drawn to this company when I was evaluating potentially leaving Awardco was just the inception story, where I'm just a firm believer that the founder story is really quite important. And the short of it is that we are a technology, a platform that was built by a broker with broker pain points in mind. And really with the general thought of how do I create a scalable, modern, technology first process for educating employees and educating employers, or empowering employers to educate their employees on the very convoluted and nuanced topics of benefits. We work directly with brokers, we work with HR teams, we work with many others in the benefit ecosystem, and we kind of view ourselves as a company that could become really an ecosystem layer, in an interconnective tissue, if you will, between all of the stakeholders that come together to do this work on behalf of the human beings that are covered at the end of the day by these employer-sponsored benefit plans.
And that layer's missing. I mean, it's not. Well, now it's not, but there's a need for it. I can see the need for it, just from the conversations that I have on a weekly basis. I don't know if you see this at Bright, but it seems like many leaders still view benefits as a line item, a necessary expense. I mean, from your experience, I'm curious, where does that mindset fall short? Let me give a little bit more context to the question. It is a line item. It is a necessary expense, right? I'm not talking about entirely shifting the mindset, because we have to accept, what reality it is. But I think that looking at it that way is incredibly narrow-minded, I think, when it's just in a vacuum like that. And I'm kind of curious from your perspective, again, what do you see happens with leaders who are looking at it through that narrow lens?
Yeah, that's a great question and an important call out to think about. I would very much agree that it is a line item, and it's a large line item, right? Maybe one of the largest outside of straight compensation and payroll for most companies out there. But it's a line item that oftentimes gets kind of overlooked as far as what can we do to make sure that we're getting the best and the maximum possible ROI on this line item, and what does this line item exist to do, and who to serve, right? And I think taking a step back and thinking about it through that lens of, at the end of the day, we're offering these things for the human beings who work at this organization. And sure, there is legal requirements. Employers are required to do certain things, but because you're required to do it doesn't mean that you should do the bare minimum or kind of not evaluate the impact that it's having when you overlay it on the employee value proposition. I think there's been a shift in the market over the last few years. And I saw this from my time at Awardco, where more and more employers are starting to realize and recognize that they have to do more to attract and retain the best people. And everybody wants to attract and retain the best people. And I think with shifting demographics in the workplace being one factor, where we're looking at such a large percentage of the working population is now becoming millennials and Gen Zs. I think the tactics that used to work decades ago just simply won't work anymore. Right? I remember a lot of sales conversations at Awardco, talking to business owners, HR leadership, both in small business and large business, and there was always a percentage of folks that would just say, "Well, we're paying our employees. Like, shouldn't that be enough? Like, shouldn't the paycheck be enough? Like, that's why they're here to do the work." And I think across all industries, there's kind of been this recognition where it's simply no longer the case. People value. There's a lot of data out there, and people value different things. People value a company that has a real purpose and a purpose that they can align with. People value autonomy and the ability to be challenged and to master skills. And right, there's a whole spectrum of where employees are going to land on this. But I think that kind of macro shift, if you will, is lifting a lot of technology organizations that are driving real solutions and real outcomes when it comes to better empowering leaders and better fostering cultures that drive better performance. And my personal opinion is that cultures of appreciation are going to do a good job of kind of balancing intrinsic and extrinsic motivation on the employee level.
Yeah, I would. I second that motion. Probably would be in the wrong business if I didn't. But it kind of leads me to you'll hear companies say, our benefits aren't working. You probably heard that a million times when you were at Awardco. You probably still hear that now. I'm curious what you found when you hear things like that. What's usually broken, right, within their packages or how they approach these things. I know that choice and flexibility often come up a lot in benefits conversations. There's a generational gap now, especially where you may have multiple generations who want very different things, and I guess when we look at what's broken, I'm curious if a lot of it has to do with leadership mindset, like we just talked about, if some of it has to do with the actual mechanics of what it is that people are getting and they're using. And how long has this been going on, as being problematic? There you go. A single question with like 100 parts to it.
Yeah, geez, how do I take this piece by piece? Well, I'm going to start with the area that like really resonated with me, just this concept of what's broken. And I would posit that it may not be broken. It may be more of a symptom of lack of understanding, lack of good communication, and lack of empathy. And I'll share a specific example. So when I started at Awardco, my wife was pregnant with my first daughter, and I don't remember going through my benefit elections, and that was never anything that was on my mind at that time in my life. I remember saying, "Awesome, there's health coverage. Seems like there's a couple plan. I can get dental and vision, and that's probably all I'm going to do. Actually, I'm not going to do vision because I don't have contacts, and neither does my wife. We don't wear glasses. So that was like my level of understanding. And even looking at the health plan, it was like, well, I'm generally young, view myself as pretty healthy. We're pretty healthy. Like, I think the high deductible plan is probably the best option. Could I explain why I chose one plan over another? Like, absolutely not. It was just like A versus B. What is the monthly cost? This one's more expensive, probably a better plan. Here's the network. That means nothing to me. It's inherently a confusing conversation. Now, fast forward, I just had my second daughter, and I now work in this industry, and I talk about these things every single day, day in, day out. And I'm doing my best to understand so I can communicate and teach others that there's something called a hospital indemnity plan. That may be something to evaluate if you know you're going to have a child and have a hospital stay. Maybe if you have young kids and you're very active, you can consider an accident policy. So I think so many companies are really putting in the effort to create really, really well thought out and comprehensive, robust benefit designs and benefit packages. I think the disconnect, or what's broken, if you will, to close the loop on that, is not the work that the employers are doing, putting it all together, or the work that the broker is doing on behalf of the employee of doing a good job of kind of shopping the right packages and implementing and putting everything together. The disconnect may just be how all that work actually reaches the employees. Like, where is the execution on the strategy? And if you're not executing on the strategy that you're doing, then you're not going to get a good return on the massive investment that you're making into the program. So lack of participation is a problem. Lack of understanding is a problem. Lack of actual benefit usage is a problem. And I think all of those have potential solutions, and from our point of view, very, very strong solutions when it comes to just better education. Right? A more informed consumer, a more informed human being is going to make a better choice when it comes to what they will select and what they won't select when it comes to protecting themselves and their families.
I'm curious, and something tells me I have a good idea of how you might answer this, because we come from a little bit of the same, I think, mindset. But you know, when people leave, a company, or a team or whatnot, there's a lot of talk about leaving the leadership, leaving the manager or management, the working conditions, right? The team dynamics, the expectations, um, and all those things are very real, and probably, arguably could be some of the biggest drivers behind churn. I'm curious how you feel that benefits, like, sort of quietly influence the trust, the engagement, that culture, the retention, even when employees don't really talk about them as much directly. Um, right? I mean, we have platforms like AwardCo, we have platforms like MustardHub and Bonusly and Achievers, and all these great, really sophisticated platforms that do things to help develop and build better cultures and better workplaces, because we know the impact of a not good workplace. But sometimes when we talk about what churn looks like and maybe why it even exists to the level it does in some places, we're not always talking about benefits, but we know that benefits influence these things. Kind of curious how much you feel like it does, or in what ways, even though we're not talking about them directly.
Yeah, it's a really great question, and there's two pieces that I want to address in it. And kind of starting with the benefits portion, I think it's safe to say and safe to assume that most individuals, most employees probably don't have a very, very clear understanding or good picture of the actual dollar amounts that their benefits are worth. And we used to say a lot at Awardco when we're talking about the voluntary attrition, right, an employee leaving, and we always talked about, hey, if you have a strong culture where people feel valued, seen, and appreciated, it's not likely that they're going to go take an interview at the company next door for a 25-cent pay bump, or if we're talking salary, if the amount of effort to change is usually a blocker. So there has to be kind of a larger gap there, right? Like I'm getting very underpaid, and I think I can go to this other shop that's going to pay me more. Well, I think when employees really understand and kind of layer in benefits as part of that financial equation, they may realize that that $10,000 bump on your base salary is not actually going to equate to $10,000 extra in your pocket per year if you look at kind of the full package of what your company is offering you from a full total rewards perspective. And there's a lot of incredible companies out there that are solving this specific problem with total reward statements that are showing you not only compensation, but also the value of your benefits. So I think there's kind of the hard cost component there. And then there's also the fuzzier, if you will, the less tangible impact of what I was alluding to earlier, of people that just feel a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose on their team, are just going to be more focused on their work and their performance than they are going to be on looking at kind of what's next, right? Grass is always greener, sort of a adage. So that's kind of the first component that I would say. The second, I may kind of go off on a tangent here a little bit, but I experienced this when I left CoStar and I went to Awardco. I joined Awardco the beginning of 2021. We were right in the middle of COVID, and I left a publicly traded, very secure company to go to an HR tech startup. And I remember when I landed and became integrated with the team and just felt like a motivation unlike any other that I had felt in my entire career up to that point, at least in kind of the SaaS corporate side of things, was culture matters, right? And doing hard work is a lot more meaningful when you feel alignment with the purpose of that hard work, and you feel alignment and connection with the team that you're on. Over time, towards the end of my experience at CoStar, it started to feel pretty toxic. And I remember in my head, I was just thinking, well, this is just life. If you want to work for a great company, and if you want to have good benefits and good pay, there's going to be some downsides that you just have to accept. And I think the world has changed where that's no longer the case, right? I think there's companies out there that can open up incredible opportunities for people where you don't have to have the Sunday scaries every night. And when I think about culture as well, the other thing to layer in here is I think culture is going to be fluid and very different if you're working for a small company versus working for a big company. And I remember always thinking that, the CEO sets the culture, right? Your executive leadership, the people at the top who are driving the mission and the vision, those are the people that set the culture for the company. Well, over time, I changed my perspective and my mind on that, where I'm a firm believer now that culture happens at a much, much smaller level. Culture happens on your team. And you mentioned a point that you hear about people leaving a bad manager. That's the truth. You could be at a company that has the best comp, the best plans, the best benefit plans, the best product, and incredible CEO, visionary, great culture at the top level. But if you have a bad manager that's micromanaging you or diminishing you in one way or another, that is your reality. You come into work and you're on that team, right? You don't, maybe once you're, if you're on a 20 employee company, then you have direct access to the CEO. But when you're at a 500 employee company or 1,000 or a 10,000 employee company, culture comes in pockets, and it happens at the team level. So I remember years back listening to a talk and then reading his book after Marcus Buckingham wrote the book Love and Work. And he talks about that, where he mentions that the highest level of leaders, they actually set and establish your talent brand, but culture, again, happens at the team level, which I thought was a really important distinction when we talk about driving manager effectiveness, high performance at the team level. And at the end of the day, retention is going to happen on that kind of direct report level.
Yeah, I love that you said that, and like I really couldn't agree more. How would you feel that, like, tying this back to sort of what Bright does, that lack of clarity, poor communication around benefits or compensation and total rewards. How do you feel um, that it, or how do you see it erode the employee experience, over time, right? A lack of transparency here seems like it would be concerning, I think, for a lot of workers. Or is it just the responsibility of the worker to figure it out on their own?
Great question. And I think you could probably ask that same question to different people within the business and get a bunch of different answers.
Yeah, I
Right?
bet. Yeah.
Generally, if we're talking to folks that are sitting within the HR organization, right, there's going to be a spectrum. Not everyone's created equal, but I think generally speaking, if I could put a blanket statement, those folks are going to care a lot more about the employee experience and making sure that everything from a comp and ben and everything human is has its space on the stage. I think when you start getting into different parts of organizations, whether it's sales or operations or executive leadership, I think a lot of times what will happen is the primary goals will just take center stage and everything else is going to fall to the wayside. I think that's going to be the problem and the disconnect there is just understanding how all of the different parts of a business can kind of be rowing in the same direction when it comes to really being intentional and diligent about thinking about your employees' experience. Um, there's a lot of great companies out there that are doing amazing things when it comes to employee experience and employee engagement, and connecting a company's organizational purpose and their core values to daily behaviors.
Yeah.
But I think it's not a simple question, right? Because at the end of the day, businesses exist for a specific reason, and the employees can serve that reason, and kind of fall in line, or they may not be valued in the way or driven to kind of rise to the potential, to the capacity of their potential, in a way that's going to foster the right growth that at the end of the day does benefit the employer organization. So I think it's a question that's really important, and I'm glad that we're talking about it. But I don't think there's one simple way to view it.
Well, if a founder or an operator, only had the bandwidth to like improve one aspect of their benefit strategy, you know, where should they start? What's your first, recommendation to somebody in that situation? By the way, I'm not prefacing this with any particular problem they're having in mind, so we're
Yeah,
just gonna
yeah. I
start
think,
generally
I
speaking.
mean, if I could boil it down to one thing that I think is the most important is communication, clear communication, with a little bit of empathy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of understanding the human condition a little bit, and that at the end of the day, your employees are humans. I know there's probably some folks that are thinking about how that could change in the not so distant future, with agentic AI. But I think, yeah, the founders, the leaders, and whether that's at the manager, the frontline manager level, or the department head level, or at the executive level, I think being very very clear in communicating. what the benefits are, what they do, and probably even at more of a basic level, that they're really there, and it's an investment to support the people, right? It's something that they're doing for you, and communicating down, and also being willing to receive communication up as well, right? Actually receive feedback from, listen and receive feedback from your employees, and acknowledge that you heard it and act on it if you can.
Well, then what's the risk of doing nothing? Status quo, what's the risk of doing nothing when it comes to these kind of benefits?
Well, I think the most immediate risk is cost containment, right? If you're investing a lot in these benefits, and it's hard to, at least in the world that I'm in, hop on LinkedIn and not see posts about costs going up, right? The number goes
Yeah.
up and to the right. Healthcare is not getting cheaper. The system is evolving, but there's components of it, incentive structures, that are maybe not aligned in the way to, again, focus on the end user as the primary point of focus. But yeah, I think I would probably leave it there.
How do you see benefits evolving? I mean, as the expectations around work and flexibility and loyalty kind of continue to change, right? I mean, we're getting into the future of work. There's so many different things changing. How do you see benefits evolving along with it in some particular way? If we had to sort of look out into the future.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of evolution, and I think there's going to be a lot of change in the coming years. I think artificial intelligence is going to be center of stage, and I think there's going to be a lot of noise out there, and the companies that are able to, clearly demonstrate problems and challenges that can be solved, or efficiencies gained, real outcomes delivered, are going to be kind of the winners, and the ones that come out of all of the noise. I think we talked earlier about just diversity in the workforce. So there's age demographics, but there's a lot of other demographics that make a workforce very diverse, and I think we're going to see more and more of a push towards personalization. Right, what's going to be the right mix of benefits for one person may not necessarily be the right mix of benefits for the next person, and I think companies have a tall task of figuring out how to balance best in class versus personalization, because you can't offer everything. So yeah, I think AI, personalization, and just how, again, we reach and interact with the individual is going to be the biggest points of evolution over the next 2-3 years, in my opinion.
Do you think that there are benefits or rewards that matter more, and not necessarily less, but really, yeah, more over the next few years? And it's interesting, like your insight from Awardco all the way up to now, right? With Bright, I'm interested to kind of hear it through your point of view.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that's a question that I'm still curious about, and trying to learn. I think you hear a lot in market right now about how the health side of the benefit world needs to change, and I think a lot of these employers that have been just kind of doing the same thing year over year, and just stomaching these significant price increases, at a certain point, you're going to hit kind of the breaking point where it's no longer sustainable and attainable. And I think anytime you get a lot of friction or strong problems, I think there's generally folks that rise up and provide innovative solutions in those areas. So I think there's going to be a lot of additional innovation, both structurally and process related, when it comes to the health side of things. I think voluntary benefits and kind of fringe flex benefits, I think that shift towards personalization is going to be something that we see, and the personalization is really only going to be successful when it's coupled with good understanding and good education. Right?
Yeah.
I alluded to earlier, like, I didn't know that these things existed, but now I do.
Yeah.
And, a hospital indemnity plan is something that could really make an impact on me personally. An accident plan, there's a lot of different products out there that may be good fit for folks
Yeah.
when they take the time, and they're guided to better understanding those things.
I kind of want to wrap up with this question I left. I feel like you're the guy to answer this question, but if a business leader were to walk up to you, Spencer, and ask, they want to build a workplace where people feel supported and feel valued, but they don't want to over engineer, or they can't, right? Their benefits. What's the single most important piece of advice beyond communication, obviously,
Yeah.
that you would give them?
What a great question. Yeah. I think if it's a single piece of advice, I think I would just say be empathetic, and really, really be conscious of how you can overlay empathy onto the decisions that you make when you're thinking about how you want to create an environment for your people that you work with or that work for you to thrive. And I don't think there is a better way to do it than through empathy. I don't think there is a better way to truly motivate folks through authentic connection than through vulnerability and empathy. So that goes to benefits, but I think that also goes to compensation and really everything when it comes to, again, that really, really important relationship between an employee and an employer. So yeah, I think, and maybe that's on my mind because, I just finished Satya Nadella's, the Microsoft CEO's book, where he just talks about, he just bangs it over the head, empathy and the importance of empathy. But I think at the end of the day, right, we're talking about human beings, and I think making sure that we recognize that they are human and we are human, at least for now, is really, really important.
Had to throw that in there.
Yeah,
Um,
I would get booed
no,
off the stage.
very, very good. I love it, Spencer. That makes a lot of sense. I appreciate you. This has been a great chat, and I'm so glad you were able to join me today. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation as well. And like I said, the first time we met, I'm really, really passionate about the work that you're doing. And so let's continue rising the tides.
We absolutely will. And congratulations again to your family. Also, a big thank you to all you watching and listening to MustardHub Voices Behind the Build. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Please visit mustardhub.com to learn more about MustardHub and discover how we help companies become destinations for workplace happiness and turn culture into a competitive edge. Until next time.